In Washington, today marks the start of 3 days of public remembrances for the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Thousands are expected to pay their respects. 12 News reporter Skylar Henry has more details now from the court.
Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg arrived at the Supreme Court for the last time Wednesday, where she now lies in repose.
It has been said that Ruth wanted to be an opera virtuoso, but became a rock star instead.
Chief Justice John Roberts said Ginsburg changed the face of the law in the United States.
She was not an opera star, but she found her stage right behind me in our courtroom. There she won famous victories that helped move our nation closer to equal justice under law, to the extent that women are now a majority in law schools, not simply a handful.
Later, President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton arrived to honor Justice Ginsburg. It was President Clinton who nominated her to the court in 1993.
Justice Ginsburg's casket has been placed at the top of the Supreme Court steps, and hundreds of people from all across the country have come here to say goodbye.
Julie and Hannah Roscrans say they wouldn't be a family now without Justice Ginsburg.
We are able to get married and have the kind of safety and protections because of her and people like her. Raising a son, we just wanted to come here and say thank you for everything she has done for us.
Justice Ginsburg will break another barrier Friday when her casket is moved to Statuary Hall. She'll be the first woman to lie in state in the U.S. Capitol.
The public paid respects to Rosa Parks in the Capitol Rotunda in 2005. That is known as lying in honor rather than lying in state because the civil rights pioneer did not serve in government.
Now, the Target 12 investigators continue our in-depth coverage of the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Rhode Island's U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse among the many paying their respects to the justice today. The senator will be a key player in deciding who will fill her vacant seat on the Supreme Court as the fourth most senior Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Today, Senator Whitehouse gave his first local interview on the Supreme Court fight to 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi. Ted joins us now at 4:30 with a look at what's coming up later tonight.
Yeah, so Brian, the first thing that I found interesting was my first question to Senator Whitehouse was, were you surprised, like so many of us were? He wasn't. He said that there had been some, I'd say, whispers among people who follow the Supreme Court closely that she was in failing health, and he'd heard that from some folks, so he wasn't stunned. But of course, he shares the feelings about her legacy that so many have expressed and thinks she's going to be a historic figure.
I think if you look at the way in which she changed the entire approach of American law with respect to gender issues and discrimination between men and women, she's going to go down in history as one of the most consequential figures in the 200 plus years that we have been a democracy. She's a big deal.
And Ted, I know one of the main reasons that you wanted to speak with the senator for your story coming up at 5 today is because of the key role that he's going to play in finding her replacement. Yeah, Kim, I mean, some people sometimes here in Rhode Island understandably don't necessarily know the way their representatives and senators are seen in Washington. And in Senator Whitehouse's case, he has a very high profile on these judicial issues, both positively and negatively. Many liberals love he fights with the conservative justices and the people who are allied with them. But Republicans have been very critical of the lines of questioning from Senator Whitehouse back at the Brett Kavanaugh hearing when he faced that sexual assault allegation. So I asked him if he regrets that, and I'll have his answer coming up at 5.
All right, Ted, nice job getting the first local interview there, by the way.
Absolutely. You keep them on speed dial for a reason.
Nice work. We'll see you at 5. Thanks so much, Ted.
Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is lying in repose at the Supreme Court tonight. During a ceremony there today, she was remembered as a trailblazer and a fierce advocate for women's rights. There will be 3 days of public remembrances. President Trump is expected to come to the Supreme Court to pay his respects tomorrow. The president says he needs to move quickly to name her replacement so the full court can hear any cases that come up from the November election.
Among those paying their respects today, Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who's also already at the center of the brewing fight in Washington over her replacement. Today, Senator Whitehouse gave his first local interview about the confirmation battle to 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi. Ted joins us now with the story.
Senator Whitehouse tells me he'd been hearing that Justice Ginsburg's health was failing, so her death didn't come as a surprise to him. With the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Republican leaders have the chance to replace an iconic liberal justice with a conservative just weeks before an election where Democrats hope to turn them out of office.
And we, I think, want to make sure that we are being as responsible and aggressive as we can, that we do everything in our power to slow this down.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse will play a key role in questioning President Trump's Supreme Court nominee as a senior Democrat on the Judiciary Committee.
And there's a very big difference between a court that will follow conservative judicial principles and get to whatever result they dictate, and a court that wants to get to results that will provide victories for Republican political interests.
Whitehouse has become a national figure in the fight over the courts. His outspoken criticism of the conservative justices and their allies has drawn him praise from liberals like MSNBC host Rachel Maddow and attacks from the Wall Street Journal's influential editorial page.
It was over the top.
Former Rhode Island Supreme Court Justice Robert Flanders challenged Whitehouse unsuccessfully in 2018. He says the senator mishandled that year's confirmation hearings for Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
I said at the time, and I still believe that it was a shameful cross-examination of this man on his high school yearbook.
Do you have any regrets about how you handled your lines of questioning in the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, and will you have any difference in how you handle this one?
Well, you know, this will be very different because we won't have a situation that we had in Kavanaugh, which is that we had a Supreme Court nominee who late in the process turned out to have a very credible issue that he'd engaged in a sexual assault.
Democrats are also crying foul because 4 years ago, Republicans blocked a vote on President Obama's final court pick, citing the upcoming election. Whitehouse and Flanders weigh in on that dispute coming up, new at 6. Ted Nesi, 12 News.
Mourners continue to pay their respects tonight to the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This is a live look outside the U.S. Supreme Court. She will lie in repose through tomorrow. Meanwhile, the fight over President Trump's plan to replace her is already raging. Rhode Island U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is at the center of that debate, and today he gave his first local interview about the confirmation battle to 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi.
Democrats say it's not appropriate for Republicans to replace Ginsburg this close to an election, but Republicans say they have the votes to do it. Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse in Washington Wednesday paying his respects to the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
She's going to go down in history as one of the most consequential figures in the 200-plus years that we have been a democracy.
As a senior Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Whitehouse is now preparing for a titanic fight over President Trump's nominee to succeed her. Like other Democrats, he says Republicans have flip-flopped, noting they blocked President Obama's final court pick Merrick Garland in 2016 because it was an election year. What do you say to that argument from the Republicans that, hey, Democrats would do the same thing if a conservative justice had opened up and they had the votes in the Senate and the White House?
Well, I think the hypocrisy factor of what they said when they were stiff-arming President Obama over a very moderate Justice Garland in order to hold the seat open for a much more extreme Justice Gorsuch, and the way they're behaving now is worthy of note.
It's perfectly constitutional to do this.
Former Rhode Island Supreme Court Justice Robert Flanders was Whitehouse's opponent in 2018. He and other Republicans say the current situation is different because, unlike in 2016, the same party controls the White House and the Senate.
So there's a long history of this situation, and the political fact is that when the president and the Senate are controlled by the same party, it's much easier to confirm a nomination as compared to when they're not, and history bears that out.
Some Democrats say that if Republicans do replace Ginsburg, their party should add more justices to the Supreme Court if they win in November. Whitehouse tells me it's too soon to engage in hypotheticals. Ted Nesi, 12 News.